Well, thank you, Julia, for the invitation, facilitated through Nigel. Thank you, Nigel and Julia. Can you hear me clearly enough? So the title of what I was going to talk about is called Love, Its Gifts and Dilemmas. It's a huge topic, isn't it, love? But I think I've neatly sidestepped that because I said sort of love can be a very nourishing gift, but there are also dilemmas in being able to sit with an open heart when deeply painful material emerges. Dharma practice and good psychotherapy can create the objectivity required to understand our emotions more fully. So I'm sort of speaking from the perspective of being a psychotherapist, sitting with our patients, and how one sits with an open heart and an open mind, and how we tackle, how we just sit with that. But I think it can also be applied to how we sit with anything that's painful in our own lives, but with an open-heartedness and open-mindedness, and also how we sit with the powerful emotions of others in an open-hearted way. But the focus in the way I've constructed this talk is around sitting as a psychotherapist. And I hope that if you're not a psychotherapist, you can extrapolate somewhat from that. So I begin by thinking about interiority. And I would say that the thing that links Zen and psychotherapy is their shared investment in what I would describe as interiority, a curiosity about the inner world. And I also take it as read that the invitation to interiority in the people who see me for psychotherapy emerges out of something often that's really deeply troubling. So to take the last four people who have sought me out, they've said things like, I've been suicidally depressed since the age of 11. Or I've struggled to be authentically in relationship during my adult life. Or I feel as if I'm addicted to debt. And of a 17-year-old, I'm overwhelmed by such intense anxiety that I cannot begin to understand. And it is so overwhelming that I just can't go to school. And to my mind, each of these is an invitation to a deeper understanding of the interior life. And yet, like the intensely felt troubles they are heralded by, the interior is guarded like the wheel of life and death in the Tibetan tradition, which I know nothing about. It's guarded like that wheel of life and death. There may be gardens of earthly delight inside, or representations of the pure land, or indeed hells. But the wheel itself is held in the teeth of a most fearsome devil. And I also take it that all my patients, the people who seek me out for psychotherapy, are hooked up, caught, ensnared in some aspect of essentialism. They believe they are suicidal, or crap at emotions, or crap at relationships, or addicted to debt, or too anxious to go to school. But while listening with deep attention to their accounts of themselves, and while being deeply attuned to their emotional experience, I don't believe any of that. I don't believe any of it. And my job as psychotherapist is not to persuade them, but to allow in our relationship something to emerge that enables them to have that same experience. Just an inkling that there may be multiple perspectives that flow through their seemingly fixed experience. Yeah. So at best, and it's only at best, my interior experience of sitting with the patient comes akin to Bodhidharma. Bodhidharma was one of the great Zen patriarchs. And Bodhidharma, the great patriarch of Zen, and I'm just interested, I was interested as I wrote this for a moment, how in Zen we can refer to patriarchs so benignly, yeah? But we are in the midst of rediscovering our matriarchy as well. And anyway, in the story, this central trope of Zen law, Bodhidharma is summoned to meet the Emperor Wu, who, interestingly, the historical record seemed to suggest, was probably a woman. Emperor Wu, a woman. Yeah. And the story gathers up some of the motifs from a deeply dangerous time for Zen, when the empire was pushing back against the massive infiltration into religious and cultural life of 6th century China. And don't we know those dangerous moments when we feel that we are being infiltrated, overwhelmed, that closed, narrow-minded politics that pushes back against multi-faith perspectives? Yeah? And drill down into my whiteness, and you'll find a barbarian from the north, a Denisovian who walked the highlands of Tibet, an ancestor who hunted on the African savannah, my stunted Neanderthal uncles who hunted bear and wolf at close quarters in the woods. And I joke with my wife Jeanette that when we go running, that I'm the sort of stunted Neanderthal and she's this, Homo sapiens from the savannah as she runs ahead. Yeah, so there I am hunting bear at close quarters in the woods. So here is Bodhidharma, and he's called in front of Emperor Wu. And Emperor Wu is at that moment of pushing back against the infiltration of Zen. It's a dangerous moment. And in this encounter between Bodhidharma and the Emperor Wu, Bodhidharma is summoned to this emperor who is actually a devoted Buddhist. And he says, or she says, "Since I came to the throne, I have built countless temples, copied countless sutras," and all of this is true, it's part of historical record, "and given supplies to countless monks. Is there any merit in all of this?" And Emperor Wu is asking a question central to Buddhism at the time and the emergence of the Mahayana wisdom tradition. And Bodhidharma's unexpected, provocative, and no doubt dangerous reply is, "There's no merit at all. Nothing. Nothing in it." "Why is there no merit?" the emperor asks, to which Bodhidharma says, "All these are only the little deeds of men and gods, a leaking source of rewards, which follow them as shadows follow the body. Although the shadow may appear to exist, it is not real." "What then is true merit?" asks Emperor Wu. "True merit consists in the subtle comprehension of pure wisdom, whose substance is silent and void. But this kind of merit cannot be pursued according to the ways of the world." And then the emperor further asks, "What is the first principle of the sacred doctrine?" To which Bodhidharma replies, "Vast emptiness with nothing sacred in it." And finally, the emperor asks, "Who is this who stands before me?" "I don't know," says Bodhidharma, and took his leave. Yeah? It's a great story, isn't it? Yeah. Right. So every encounter at best with a patient is like this, full of potential and replete with danger. And the most dangerous is that encounter with intimacy. And what is intimacy? It is the possibility that we may find that every atom of our being, every proto-thought that flickers across our cortex, every flush of emotion blooming out through our limbic system can be met and held and experienced, as Nigel was saying, and ultimately perhaps understood. Ultimately perhaps understood. And I don't mean understood to be confined in what can be known cognitively. Perhaps a better word is apprehended. Apprehended? My task is to apprehend the patient in their fullness. In this unique and bounded moment, this crossing point between the unbounded and the bounded. And therein lies the danger, because I'm but a frail instrument, limited, prejudiced, and is those very limitations my comfort with their discomfort, the discomfort of my limitations, that holds the possibility of transformation. We people, myself included, it seems, are terrified of intimacy, terrified of the inner world, terrified of parts of ourselves, stumbling and fumbling to put this peculiar inner self into words, reaching at best for symbols that represent it, often magical, but very often too concretely magical, like Emperor Wu. Where's the merit in it? Yeah, too concretely magical. The best being poetry, literature, film, TV, some wonderful TV on at the moment, that have real reflexive qualities, that say as you're listening, reading, viewing it, we're just playing with these experiences. They are approximations, indications, a finger pointing at the moon, but not the moon itself. And here's a clue to the centre of this talk. On the one hand, limitation. On the other hand, vast emptiness. Yeah, like the throwing the piece of fruit out into the middle of nowhere. It just goes on and on and on to the vast reaches and ends of the universe and beyond even that. Yeah. And here's the clue to the centre of this talk. On the one hand, limitation, on the other hand, vast emptiness and my human frailty. But I have to say here that sunyata, the emptiness that the practice of Zen invites, is love. And everything resides in it. All possibilities have their potential. It is an invitation to freedom, an invitation, as my first teacher said, to come home and gently rest. Rest in this emptiness. Emptiness is love, but actually it's not love at all. It's just vast emptiness. But believe me, in that vast emptiness, there is an invitation to be unbounded. And I can't find a better phoneme for love than that. So one walks this double edge. Actually, it's not double at all. It just is. It just is. Deeply connected to emotional experience, and simultaneously in this place of vast possibility. Look, I'm shouting at you so loud inside my head to the patient. You don't necessarily need to be bound to that essentialist perspective. Your suicidal depression is actually replete with vast life-affirming possibility. And yet that thought at the same time is mockingly painful. It's mockingly painful. The gap between us, seemingly at that moment, is vast. And yet as I close upon that emotional experience, there is an immense possibility. And my task is to absorb and digest that terrible, mocking painfulness. The gap between their immense possibilities and the essential closed nature of their emotional experience at that moment. Do you get it? Do you get it? Let me take another angle on this. When we first begin to meditate, in beginner's mind, we often have beautiful, relaxing experiences, a letting go and a letting into the vastness of our interior selves that's completely intriguing. And yet, as we progress, we discover why the wheel of life and death is full of scenes of hell as much as of the pure land. Our dark meannesses come to confront us. We find ourselves sitting with our most compelling and shameful failures and inadequacies. Someone came to see me recently and said she had thought of herself as a deeply compassionate, giving person, but shockingly, through deepening meditation, she was beginning to discover, she thought, that she was no longer compassionate. She thought, I'm discovering that I don't like people, and that's the opposite of why I had become to meditate. I'm having a really difficult time with my son. I no longer want to do these things for him that I've done all my life. I'm saying no, and it's really hurtful. She thought, I'm just discovering I don't like people. And that's the opposite of what I wanted to experience through Zazen. I want to give up. Fantastic, I said. That's just fantastic. This is real progress. You are going beyond an idealization of what Zazen is all about to a real appreciation of its fruits. Life is no longer in a box, bounded by the limitation of your ideas. It's breaking free, dangerous though that may seem. And my suspicion is you weren't necessarily being compassionate at all in your previous human encounters, more likely merely pleasing and compliant. Yeah. And here's another clue to the centre of this talk. Seemingly, what we are afraid of leaps out at us unconsciously to attack others. Our shame, anger, violent thoughts, as Nigel was describing, sexual longings, the things we are afraid of etherize in this unique and privileged space of the consulting room as we descend into ourselves. And in the psychoanalytic tradition, attentive silence is eulogized as the means of descent. But there are other ways. With one deeply bereaved patient, week by week, we found poetry was the medium. The space between the words of poetry and their meanings is vast. Another struggling with profound depression and alcoholism brings a drawing week by week. I bought some slides of these drawings, but I realised it's too much to get the slides up. And week by week, a subject emerges between us. One was time and tides. Another was finding the light. In fact, that was this week's, finding the light inside others. Another, this is a quotation from St. John Chrysostom. When you find the door to your heart, you have found the gate of heaven. Another was from Dogen, I am not my thoughts. And then there are dreams, the royal road. But in all of this, we almost certainly encounter the undigested. The undigested, rejected, disavowed parts of our patients. And if we're sitting in this vast openness, those disavowed parts penetrate us. And this is the danger of love, the danger of sunyata. We would be idealizing ourselves if we think we can transform it all ourselves through the positive workings of projective identification, absorbing the patient's disavowed experience, digesting it and gently representing it in ways they can take hold of and reavow. In the Zen tradition, there is the image of the Jizo, typically the manifestation of the Bodhisattva who can heal the wounds of the world. The manifestation of the Bodhisattva who can heal the wounds of the mother who has lost her child in death, the guardian of children, travellers, and the most vulnerable. And in one startling image of Jizo, she is pictured without hands, arms outstretched, contemplating the sighs and cries of the deeply wounded world. One cannot underestimate the sheer potential of just listening, of hearing and validating through deep attention to what is so difficult to hear, so difficult to bear. Nevertheless, holding one's seemingly helpless arms out in that vast emptiness, it does it good. But here are the dangers of love. It penetrates, it hurts, it's deeply painful, and it resonates also with all of our wounds. Yeah. But just to hold one little corner of the vast robe of the Dharmakaya between forefinger and thumb, just to know it's there, the blackbird giving throat to its silver song in a nearby tree, just to know it's there, the rumble of traffic on the A46, the slow attention to my breath. But let's not idealize these properties. And perhaps in doing so, we can merely be grateful that we have some slight protective knowledge of them. There we are. Thank you.